Hello. So we're Team Patchwork Built. My colleagues and I decided on creating an advocacy network for better contract formation.
Palm oil is critical to the international economy. Products ranging from shampoo to peanut butter to biofuels contain palm oil. In fact, 50% of all processed products include palm oil derivatives. If you take a look at the chart on the bottom, you'll notice that palm oil, in comparison to other common farms in Indonesia, is the best option for farm land utilization in terms of labor and profitability. And considering that palm oil is the most efficient type of oil derivative, its presence in Indonesia is vital. However, the industry is plagued with environmental sustainability and human exploitation crises. For example, studies have shown that replanting palm oil plantations reduce biodiversity in the soil by over 20%. And a recent Associated Press article highlights the perils and abuses of palm oil workers. Many female workers face sexual assault by their bosses. Other workers have detailed uses of outlawed, harmful pesticides, some even by companies certified by the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, RSPO. These issues all stem from Indonesia's unregulated big palm industry.
So what's so bad about that? Well, big palm frequently buys fallow land, which is defined as land that was formerly home to rice farms or rubber agriculture or the like, but has now fallen out of use. The farmers who previously owned the land oftentimes sign bad contracts that, as our research maintains, they frequently haven't read or did read, but were unaware about how these contracts were designed to be exploitative in nature, because oftentimes they were planned by local officials that didn't have the farmer's best interest at heart, or certain clauses thrown in by the big palm companies themselves. Because of this, the land is oftentimes used in manners that the farmers did not intend, and then oftentimes the land is destroyed for future use or chances of resale. And selling the land in the first place will cause the smallholders to lose out on the benefits of the rising land values throughout the years by holding the land. An article by Rist and Levang explains that the word of these bad contracts and their effects oftentimes spreads through neighboring communities. For instance, if one village has had a bad experience with a bad palm or big palm company, their neighboring villages are less likely to sign these contracts as well. And so the need for a network of advocates arises.
Our main criteria for advocate selection is that the individuals sourced have been directly impacted by palm oil production and can recant the negative impacts that it has had on their livelihood. Leyah is a member of the Dayak Madong community in Long Bentuk, which is in East Kalimantan. She is a great candidate for advising other Kalimantan communities because she understands and has experienced firsthand the environmental and financial impacts of oil palm harvesting. Because runoff from oil palm plantations upstream caused Leyah's rice plot to flood, she has dealt with lower crop yields, less revenue as a result of those lower crop yields, and the negative environmental effects of palm oil harvesting. Patchwork Built believes that farmers like Leyah should share their stories with other Kalimantan communities to warn them of the dangers of palm oil companies and the dangers of harvesting the crop itself.
So what do we do about this problem of predatory big palm? We establish a strong advocacy network as a part of our nonprofit, recognizing that downstream neighboring villages were resistant to selling after witnessing adverse effects nearby. We believe members from these communities badly affected by big palm, when mobilized, will be able to tell their stories and warn other villages about the dangers of signing contracts with big palm. But if these new villages want to sell, our traveling advocates will bring our nonprofit organization to their attention. These advocates will be a connecting force between underdeveloped villages and us. If a village we've been involved with gets contacted by big palm to sell, we will help intervene. We will advocate for and educate the villagers in their contract negotiations, and we will counsel them to lease under our proposed model, which protects their community. By warning them of the dangers and repercussions of selling to big palm through our traveling advocates, we will have convinced villagers that we can help to achieve favorable terms that protect the local environment and protect local workers.
Here are some quick facts about our planned operation. There are 7,229 villages in the Kalimantan region of Indonesia. We realistically believe that we can reach about 10% of these villages with our current resources. Our initial target is 730 villages being visited by advocates from villages that have been negatively impacted by big palm and unsustainable palm oil production, sharing their personal experiences and forming a strong network. We plan on incentivizing those who travel to other villages to engage in advocacy with a $700 stipend. With 730 planned visits, this would amount to $511,000, or a little over half of our budget. We would then spend about $250,000 to hire a full-time team of workers to help organize these visits and assist with contract negotiations. Finally, the remainder of our budget would go to logistical costs. We aim to establish this network in 1 year.
The lease model solution is a core tenet of our business model. We are looking to provide Kalimantan villagers with accessible information regarding the benefits of leasing rather than selling their farmland. This model's benefit is threefold. First is environmental sustainability. While the government and big palm companies do not put much emphasis on environmental sustainability, a vast majority of Kalimantan locals fervently fight against deforestation. This sentiment is strong, and recently, the governor of East Kalimantan has pushed back against the proposed relocation of the Indonesian capital if it meant further deforestation. By ensuring environmental clauses are put into leasing contracts, landowners can keep big palm in check environmentally, whether that be a recovery period prior to replanting, making sure the company doesn't use illegal pesticides, and labor-wise, ensure the company is paying fair and non-exploitative wages. Second is smallholder land advocacy. We plan to provide advocates that can assist smallholders through the contract negotiation process. Oftentimes, big palm sneaks in intentionally ambiguous clauses that can take advantage of smallholders in the future, such as seizing their land at the end of a contract, even though it wasn't the smallholder's intention. And third is empower communities. As a grassroots nonprofit, we wield power as a collective for the smallholder community. Before, when local officials negotiated contracts, the interests of the smallholder were put on the back burner. Patchwork Built recognizes we need to incentivize the local government to work with us by allocating a small portion of the village's profits for government use. Therefore, we are reinvesting in the community.
To expand on the ideas outlined in the previous slide, Patchwork Built will ensure the protections of the farmers' communities by crafting contracts that specifically establish these environmental regulations and labor protections that the big palm companies must follow in order to continue operations on the land. Any breach of contract would result in permanent termination of the firm's activities on the land. Our permanent staff will aid in the creation of contracts for sure, but also they will continue in monitoring the large firms in each area. Specifically, we'd want to look at protecting land that is both culturally significant, well, either or culturally significant or diverse. A major consequence of deforestation is the elimination of biodiversity, so protecting areas with a variety of life is crucial for these large companies. And additionally, culturally significant lands are also worthy of being preserved. As well, we'd also like to look at pesticides and fire safety. We want to specify pesticide usage in a safe way and ensure that fire safety protocols are always followed to preserve these elements of the environment and not have too much of an impact, again, on biodiversity in the area.
The labor protections that these large firms must follow include minimum wage, minimum age, and no forced labor. If these large firms do not abide by these requirements, we relinquish the right to their use of those 10 hectares of land. This measure will ensure that these firms will not be able to continue malpractice, which benefits the environment as well as each employee's financial security, health, and safety.
So we've developed a model for assisting these communities, and now we want to make it sustainable. So a village of a population of 1,200 selling 2,300 hectares to a palm oil company will generate close to $1,800,000 in gross profit per year when the palms mature. Assuming that we can facilitate contract terms with 10 villages averaging this size and take a 5% fee, we would make about $900,000 a year and be able to sustain our operation, so that we can continue to inform villages year after year of the repercussions of selling their land to palm oil companies and ensure that if they do sell, We are there to help the local community protect its environment and workers through favorable contract terms. This is our bibliography. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Do you have any questions for us?
Thank you, Team Patchwork Build. Now the judges will have 5 minutes to ask questions.
Good work, team. So the palm oil industry has historically been very violent, especially towards conservationists and indigenous activists. And I'm wondering what your safeguarding plan is for the organization and especially your community advocates to protect them from potential threats and violence.
Yeah, I can go ahead and help answer that. So one of the big things is that we as a nonprofit, we aren't looking to be like independent. We're looking to work with some of the other nonprofits in the area. And we're really trying to make sure that our community can grow to encompass many of the smallholders across the region so that the fear of retribution becomes much smaller when your community is in the masses.
We also are providing $700 grants, which is actually about 3 times the average monthly minimum wage. So it's quite a big grant to give for someone to travel and go to these villages. We likely are going to be employing multiple advocates that are going to nearby communities to each other. So they'll likely be traveling in groups, which means their safety will likely be a little bit more assured instead of going off alone by themselves.
I'm glad that this came up because I had 2 questions for you all. One was why 700? I was very curious about that figure, and the other one was what types of partners are you planning to work with? So you mentioned some areas that might require sort of a list of capabilities that you probably as a young NGO don't have yet, and that is legal aid, working with maybe another organization that has that legal capacity, or public relations, and creating that kind of education. But also I was thinking about labor laws and issues, what other organizations might be out there that you may have thought that you will be working with.
So I believe we'd be working closely with the Forest Peoples Program in Indonesia, and their mission statement is to work with indigenous and local communities to help secure their rights to land and self-determination. And we think the key part of our model, the leasing, is what gives the self-determination and the rights to the land, ensuring that for these indigenous communities. The model of selling completely takes away any claim to the land that the indigenous communities have. So we believe that our values would align with the Forest Peoples Program, and that we would be able to work with them after we've set these contract terms. They might be able to help with, keeping tabs in the community and ensuring that the indigenous peoples continue to have some autonomy over how their land is used. Also, we came up with that $700 figure because we were looking at how much would it take to really be significant, in the sense that it's going to cover the cost of travel for this individual. It's also going to be meaningful to them to also be a way to replace the labor that they have otherwise been displaced from because their farms have been destroyed, or they signed an unfavorable contract and therefore have lost their livelihood. So in some ways our advocacy program is actually providing employment to these individuals who have been laid off in a way through either environmental runoff, destroying their livelihood, or the palm oil companies themselves taking it away from them.
Probably short on time, but I was also wondering if you could share a little bit more about the distinguished responsibilities between the full-time team that you would be hiring and then these individual advocates who would be receiving the stipends, and sort of how the divide and conquer of work would happen there.
I can absolutely speak to that. So we have, so we plan on having a full-time team of mostly people who are bilingual and can speak English and Malay and other local languages. And these people would mostly help with contract negotiations and help organize the visits made by the people who are going between the villages. Meanwhile, the people who are getting the $700 stipends are residents of villages who have been afflicted by this. And they are traveling to various villages in order to raise awareness and to tell their stories and to provide a closer perspective, not an outside perspective, but rather a perspective of someone who lives near them and has had a similar life experience, and can speak really to just how destructive this can be.
If there are no more questions, thank you very much, Team Patchwork Build, and now the judges will have 5 minutes to deliberate.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank you so
work,
much.
y'all.
Thank
That
you.
was really creative.
Thank you.
Thank you.